Hello, and welcome to a special edition of Up Close on METV. I'm Charles Clapsaddle, station manager for Manatee Educational Television, and it's our privilege today to have with us Senator Mike Bennet to tell us a little bit about this recent legislative session and the degree of difficulty this year. Senator Bennet, thank you once again for taking the time to talk to us. This session was pretty difficult.
You know, the last 4 or 5 sessions have been very, very difficult, but this one obviously was even more difficult than the previous one, and it goes down that line when you've had as many years of cuts that we've had, sales tax revenue down, unemployment up. The governor's doing a great job trying to create jobs. However, with all of that, even having one of the best tourism industries or years that we've had in a long time, it was still a brutal year. I mean, we ended up with a $70 billion budget, but we did a lot for Manatee County. We did a lot for the state of Florida, put more money in education that we had really been lacking of before. So it was really, really tough. But you have to look out for the entire state. You know, a lot of people, I do whatever I can for my district. Obviously, Manatee, Sarasota, DeSoto, Charlotte, Lee are all very, very important to me. But a lot of the decisions we have to make up there affect the entire state. And when you're making a tough choice of, say, building more roads or getting funding for education, we know that the way out of this mess is better education, and we wanted to make sure that we had an additional $1 billion in there for education this year. We made some tough calls, and they're no fun, and you try to find the fairest way to do it. You know, it's interesting as you get into the leadership position of the Florida Senate, where I'm at, you get closer and closer and closer to those decisions, and when you talk to your constituents back home, sometimes they don't quite understand why did you not put more money in the road building, but when I've got to put money in there for the senior citizens and the children of the state of Florida, those are the kind of decisions you have to make.
Well, by mandate, the legislature has to present a balanced budget. And in order to do that, with the shortfall, what was the shortfall this year? It was
about $1.7 billion, $1.8 billion.
It requires some hard decisions, and you look across the board at everything that there's a potential to save money.
Well, the biggest problem we have in Tallahassee, and it really is trying to save money. Because there are so many special interests out there, whether it's in healthcare or whether it's in education or development, whatever, as you're trying to figure out the best way to allocate those dollars and trying to find that balance, be having enough money to create jobs and get our economy going. We started making some of those decisions, and some of those hurt. I mean, they passionately hurt, but you still have to be fair to everybody. You know, a lot of people think, well, the senator represents just my district. You don't. You represent the entire state of Florida. And as you're trying to figure out how do we handle our education problems in Manatee County, you certainly have to look at the education problems they have down in, say, Miami-Dade, where kids in Miami-Dade, they have to deal with, the teachers down there have to deal with, I think it's 43, 44 different languages as they're working through those problems. So trying to be fair to everybody forces you to make tough decisions, and you make the best ones you can at the time.
So the budget this year did provide a lot of resources for Manatee and Sarasota County. And one of those key things, of course, is the Benderson rowing facility, which is again before the governor, which is considered to be, can be an economic boom for this region. What's your take on that,
You know, it's
Senator?
interesting because we tried to do this last year. We tried to get $5 million to continue to develop that. But I think right now Tallahassee finally understands and truly understands the huge economic boom that facility is going to mean. And a lot of people say, well, why are you putting $5 million into there? Well, what about education? Well, we know that if we have a healthy economy down here, if we can get that tourist money coming in, if we can get the tourists to come down here and fill up the hotels and fill up the restaurants and fill up those kinds of things, they in fact bring their families with them, and it'll help our whole economy down here, and we will have more money for education and some of those other things. So that's what you're trying to do, is create jobs.
Now, you were a champion of that last year and again this year, and right now it's still on the governor's desk. Is that correct?
It's on the governor's desk, but it's wrapped up in the entire total package. it's one of those things they've got to look at, and he's got to make tough decisions. I mean, those are brutal decisions, and nobody wants to be that one sitting there with that pen striking out different things. I've certainly had issues vetoed before. He's got the last shot at it, but I think that the studies that we've provided them, the input from the community has just been phenomenal. The number of people who have gone to the governor's office and recommended that they fund this project that is so important to our local economy.
I want to come back to some budget issues later, but I want to take a moment right now because as most of this community knows, that you've been a champion of veteran causes for many years, and you've had a good measure of success this season. Could you just give a brief update about some of the veteran issues that you've championed?
Well, the veterans that we've got today, as you know, I was a veteran from Vietnam era, but the veterans that we've got today, we're sending kids to Iraq and Afghanistan, and not just one or two tours, but multiple tours. And a lot of these come from reserve outfits that they're employed, and then all of a sudden you pick them up and you move them off their job for a couple of months, or 6 months, 9 months, and they come back and they're facing all kinds of difficulties. So one of the things we wanted to do is we put together an omnibus bill this year, and making Florida the most veteran-friendly state in the nation by far. Nobody else.
That's a terrific step.
Well, these kids are over there in Iraq and Afghanistan. We wanted to make sure that they could have a preference, if you would, a early time for enrolling in some of the classes. So when they came home, they would be able to get into the college classes of their choice. A lot of our colleges are full. With the high unemployment, we've got a higher enrollment in higher education than we've ever had. And it's very difficult for them to enroll in these classes. So we wanted to give them a preference on enrolling in the classes so when they get back home, they can get their life back together. We wanted to do some things for the veterans on their property taxes. I mean, they have given so much to our country, and we want to make sure that that's not wasted. And so the veterans in Florida will probably benefit better than any group in the nation as far as what we're going to do for them here in Florida with the omnibus bill. And so we're very excited about it.
And you should be very proud of that initiative. So.
Very proud.
And that's a big step in the right direction. As the more and more veterans are returning, not just to the United States, but to Florida, and you want to be able to make sure that they have some kind of a great home to come home to.
We want to have them come home. They fought for this thing, and we want to make sure that we reward them other than just saying thanks, okay? And this is my way of saying thank you. I was very proud of the veterans bills this year and the things that we got passed, and so we're looking forward to continuing on down that path.
Now, Senator, one thing that kind of ran into a little bit of a stone wall was the redistricting plan. It seemed that the House, with their maps, and this was a year-long redistricting process with workshops and town halls throughout the state. The House drew up their maps, and they were sent to the Supreme Court. The Senate drew up their maps and were sent to the Supreme Court, and the results weren't quite the same. Can you kind of update where we stand now on the redistricting?
Well, on redistricting, as I've tried to explain before, it's an extremely difficult process. People, when they passed the constitutional amendment that you couldn't favor or disfavor, that they had to have the fair districts very difficult to come up with, because there's basically no decision you or I or any of your listeners do in life that doesn't favor or disfavor something, okay? And so we tried to do it the fairest way possible. We think we've got it right this time. It's being reviewed again by the courts and the judicial system, and so we'll take a hard look at it. But for Manatee County and Sarasota County, we think we did a good job. My district used to stretch down to Lee County. Now it'll be still going to represent 4 or 5 counties, and it's going to go out east into some of the ag lands, which is so important to Manatee County. And so we wanted to include the ag lands in there. It should be a scramble. We had very competitive races, and I think that we'll have more competitive races this year. But I think that we finally got it right. It's going to go. The Supreme Court has the final rule on it, but we expect them to approve the maps.
And one of the key elements was, if I remember, please correct me, was to make the district kind of contiguous, you know, sort of within, because there were some districts that kind of meandered around. And your colleague in Sarasota, Senator Dietert, came through with a very good contiguous district. Is that correct?
Nancy's district is a great district, and it matched all of the things that we need. Where people don't understand is each district has to represent roughly the same number of people. It's around 500,000. Well, you get up in the Panhandle with some of those small counties up there, in order to get 500,000 people, some of those things are including 13 and 14 districts up there. And so we tried to work through that. The Manatee district will include 5 counties like it does right now. The preponderance of it, though, will still be a Manatee County. Manatee County will have a huge say in that district. Whoever represents this district, and without me going into who I want or the rest of it, but we will have a major say in that. And I got to tell you, I'm going to miss Nancy Dietert representing Manatee County. I mean, she is one tough legislator, and another one is not afraid to make a tough decision. So we moved her a little bit further south. My district will concentrate in Manatee County, but it'll go out east, and so I think we'll be fine. And
the districts now, I know there was some discussion about how they were renamed. Recently, Representative Boyd was here. He's no longer going to represent the 68th.
Correct.
It becomes now District 71, is that?
I think it's 71, yeah.
So.
Well, what we did with the Senate seats is one of the things that the Supreme Court argued was that the districts were designed, or the numbering was designed, better for incumbents. And so Senator Gates says, well, we'll just do something different. Let's just do it by lottery. And they literally pulled numbers out of them. That's your district number. And some of the people who wanted 4-year seats got 2-year seats. Some of the people who wanted 2 got 4. There's a lot of manipulation in there for your own personal stuff. But the way that they finally ended up doing it, just literally by raffle. And so that's how the seat number came out.
That has to be very fair.
That's as fair to everybody. So there were some winners and some losers, just depending on where you were at on it.
Senator, this session you introduced a large number of bills, and I'd like for you to take a few moments, if you would, and talk about some of the bills that you introduced, some of the things that were successful, and some of the things that perhaps were not as successful as you would have liked them to be.
Well, the ones that I concentrated on really were those that we felt would create jobs. Okay. And one of the problems that we have in government is there's a huge problem with mission creep. Okay, so this department now all of a sudden wants to start doing some of the stuff that should be under that other department. For example, at one time it took you, I think, 5 government agencies to build a boat dock in Manatee County. Well, every time you delay those kinds of things, it adds money and cost to the consumers. And so what we try to do is concentrate on cutting down the amount of duplication in regulation. The only way that we can cut back the size of government is get the government agencies to reduce their workforce by not duplicating what some other agency is already doing. It doesn't make sense to have government-paid engineers reviewing government-paid engineers reviewing government-paid engineers, and a lot of those cases we had a lot of that. Like even in Manatee County, in order to get a permit, some of these permits, we lost the boating industry down here because it was taking so long to get a permit. Manatee County has done a wonderful job. This time we gave them some more tools so they could speed up these things. If we want to get a company to move to Florida, we can't always come up with a cash incentive. You've seen what's happened to our budget. Well, we can come up with a time incentive. If we can tell a new boat manufacturer coming to Manatee County, hey, you go ahead and start moving people in, we'll catch up with the permitting and the regulation and cut that down to save you money on them. Those are the kinds of things that we did up there in growth management.
Well, and I'd like to take a brief moment just to talk about that, because when Governor Scott came into office, unemployment was like around 11%, and recently I think the figures came out, it's like 9.4. So some of the incentives and some of the foresight and vision that you and your colleagues have been working on are generating jobs.
Absolutely, they're generating jobs, and we're seeing it's driving. It's not going as fast as we want because we've had some outside influences, price of gasoline, price of oil, those kinds of of things really affect us. The national economy affects us. But all of a sudden, we're starting now to see a relaxation of some credit markets. If we don't get the small bankers back in business in Florida, I'm not concerned about Wells Fargo or Bank of America. Our business in Manatee County in the state of Florida is concentrated around small community banks. That when a business person walks in and wants to talk to a banker, they know them by name, they know them, they know their business, they know their families, they go to church. It is built on a trust relationship. But some of the federal policies that they're dealing with have really, really put handcuffs on them. And so consequently, the credit markets have dried up. And a small business person trying to start a new business in the state of Florida or even expand their business, they can't get the money. They cannot get access to the credit markets. And so we've got to find ways to make Florida's banking community more consumer friendly, more business friendly. And those are some of the things I wish we could have concentrated on this year. Small businesses are what drive Florida. When you recruit a major company, a manufacturing company to come to Florida, that costs a lot of money, costs a lot of headaches. But that's not really the job creator. The job creator is the guy out here on the street, the small business guy who starts a little electrical company or an air conditioning company or whatever, a clothing store or whatever. That's what drives our economy, and that's the people we have to take care of.
Well, what are some other initiatives, bills that you put forward this year?
Oh my gosh, we even tried to get, Manatee County has got a huge thing for animals. They want to have a no-kill policy in the state of Florida. We tried to get that through. We failed. We lost on that one. We just got lost down in the baggage. It wasn't that people objected to it as much as it was trying to figure out ways to get it done, and we literally ran out of time. One of the things that I was very, very proud of, and at the same time disappointed, we tried to save the people of the state of Florida money in some of the Medicaid issues.
Correct.
I don't understand how we can possibly cut Medicaid by, say, $700 million, where if we would allow nurse practitioners to do in the state of Florida what they do in 48 other states, by every study we have seen, it would have saved Medicaid alone for the people of the state of Florida between $450 and $500 million a year in the Medicaid. When you look at it's huge, okay? But again, you're fighting the special interests, you're fighting the lobbyists, they don't want to do it. Well, these 48 other states, we don't see people dying in the streets. We also know that in the state of Florida, we are going to face a health care shortage for primary care people. Primary care physicians are decreasing. Medicare reimbursement is very, very low. Medicaid reimbursement is even lower. Trying to balance that out. Well, we feel that if we could allow the nurse practitioners to do a little bit more, we would take care of some of the primary care things. And we could reduce costs at the same time. So the things that I concentrated on and always continue to concentrate on are how can we reduce the cost of government. We know that we have probably at least 10, maybe 15, 20% of excess bureaucrats that we really don't need in there. We know that we've got some ways to save money through scope of practice issues, which obviously the medical profession is not real happy about, but we've got to find ways to reduce the cost and manage effectively the money that we do have. If we have a shortage of anything in Tallahassee, it's people who understand that you have to reduce costs first. We'll worry about the revenue later, but let's reduce the cost. Let's save the people. We didn't want any tax increases. How can you have a tax increase when you've got 10% of the people unemployed? In some markets, the construction market, we're at 15, 20% unemployment. You can't increase those people's taxes. You've got to find a way to reduce the cost. That's the only other option you've got.
Well, one of the things that you've emphasized in the past is efficiencies of service, efficiencies of operations. So, I mean, you can see that Governor Scott and the legislature and your leadership have tried to get those efficiencies, those business efficiencies, more of a mindset.
And it's very difficult to do. Again, because you're fighting the special interests, you're fighting the bureaucrats who really don't want to change. It's one of the effects of term limits, by the way. In term limits, by the time you really can come out and fight for it, you realize your time is up, I'm gone, but the bureaucrats are still there, and the lobbyists are still there. We need the lobbyists, and we certainly need the bureaucrats, but what we've got to do is figure out ways to get the elected people to be more responsible and fight the lobbyists, fight the bureaucrats, and protect the people of the state of Florida. I cannot think of any area of government that we can't step in and find more ways to lower the cost of doing business, whether it's the school board buying new books, whether it's a school board building an elaborate building, whether it's the sheriff's office looking for ways to buy lower cost automobiles, whether it's the Coast Guard trying to figure, not the Coast Guard, but the Fish Marine Patrol trying to figure out how they can lower their costs. We should always be looking for ways that we can negotiate, and maybe more mass buying, where each agency, we get together, put together a mass buy on radios, mass buy on computers, those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things that we can do to reduce cost.
Well, I mean, that's an interesting point. I think that's happening, you know, throughout the country too. People
Absolutely.
are looking at greater efficiencies of service. And one of the things you just mentioned, Senator, and I'd like to take it as, you know, what's good for the consumer. And in this session, there was a lengthy discussion, a lengthy battle, if you wanted to call it that, on personal injury protection, the PIP. And recently we had Representative Boyd in here who talked about, you know, his initiatives in doing that. Give us an update, if you can, on the PIP insurance and why that was so important to try to initiate that this year.
Well, across the state of Florida, not so much in Manatee County and Sarasota County, but across the state of Florida, there was a huge increase in the cost of personal injury protection. And most of that cost was driven by fraud. We had a huge fraud problem. So we wanted to attack the fraud. The Senate passed out a bill that I was very, very happy to support. It addressed all the fraud issues. I did not vote for the final bill because I felt that it went a little bit too far on some of the chiropractic treatment and some of the, if you would, non-traditional medicines.
Other services they wanted to include.
But, you know, like acupuncture. I've never had acupuncture. But if you go to the doctor and acupuncture works for you, I think a lot of that is a placebo effect because you passionately believe something is going to help you. It helps you. I don't want to take that, and I didn't want to take that opportunity away from those people who felt it. If they were referred by a medical physician, okay, I wanted them to have the opportunity. I also wanted to eliminate, if you would, some of the fraud that we had in the massage therapist. Some of these people went overboard on the fraud. And I said, look, if we could limit that to, say, 10 treatments or 5 treatments, that would be reasonable, because I think if your back is not fixed after 8 or 10 treatments, more than likely massage is not the thing that's getting you there. So let's go back to do some other more traditional treatment to help the people out. The problem that you've got with the PIP is if we cut it out completely, hospitals and well, Sarasota Memorial Hospital has a very, very difficult time when people go to the emergency room. Oftentimes that's the only insurance that they have. So we have to have a vehicle there. What we've got to do is figure out how we cut down on the fraud. And we really went after the fraud. Representative Boyd did a wonderful job. And I got to tell you, the people of the state of Florida should really be grateful to him and Brian Nelson over in the House, Senator Richter down in Naples, who really, really fought to come up with a better way to do it. It's not perfect, but we had to do something, and we didn't want to destroy it, but we wanted to cut down the fraud. Fraud is a huge problem in the state of Florida, whether it's Medicaid, whether it's PIP or whatever. It seems to be the fraud capital of the country, and to me, we should be more aggressive of going after those kinds of people.
I must say there's certain areas of the state that may be called the fraud, because I understand that, you know, like Miami, Tampa now, Orlando, or those areas where, you know, that fraud was prevalent. And, you know, it's a very important thing because it's consumer oriented. It's, you know, it's cost saving back to the consumer to try to eliminate that fraud so prices just don't continue to rise. Senator, unfortunately, kind of winding down here, and I wanted you to kind of give us a recap, if you would. You know, what would you like viewers to know about this legislative session? What was the key thing that you found, that you took away from that is in this last? And then I want to give kind of a general wrap up too, if we may.
I think that the legislative session, obviously the budget was the gorilla in the room. And then we had 2 gorillas this time because we had the redistricting.
Exactly.
That ate up a considerable amount of time. But I would have to say that the legislator this year, the average legislator sitting down there, was really really following the lead of the governor, the speaker, and the president. Let's get Florida back to work. Let's get the jobs out there. And so we really concentrated in any legislation that we felt was going to increase employment, increase education, make it easier for kids to go to college, make it easier for the kids to pass the FCAT or the rest of it private school. Those are the things we concentrated on. A lot of the other stuff, some people might call frivolous, some of it lean toward special interest, it always does. But the legislative mood was, how do we get Florida back to work? And that's what we concentrated on.
Well, Senator, it must be noted that this was your last session up there, and I think they gave you a kind of a recognition that you deserved for that. You tell us a little bit about that recognition?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. The legislative process and a lot of people involved in it really were kind enough, if you would, to reward me for my issues of trying to drive down cost and trying to represent all of the people of the state of Florida. Do you always emphasize your own district? Sure you do, because that's what you're most familiar with. But I guess I've always been known for fairness, trying to treat everybody equally, trying to treat everybody fairly on both sides of the aisle. And I've always had a wonderful working relationship with the Democratic Party. I've had a wonderful relationship with the Tea Party people because, again, trying to drive down the cost of government. But again, try to treat everybody fairly. And if you treat everybody fairly, if you can say at the end of the day, is it fair? Okay, then you'll probably have a pretty good session. And that was kind enough to be recognized by my peers and a lot of people in the community, basically on fairness and trying to find ways to solve the problems of the people of the state of Florida and hold down cost.
Well, Senator, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to come and visit on METV today, and hopefully we can kind of follow up on that career as well, because it's a long and it's a very successful career that you've spent serving the people of Florida and serving the people of this district. And I want to thank Senator Bennet for joining us and taking the time out to give us an update on those important, critical legislative issues that the state of Florida faced this year. And Senator Bennet, we'll welcome you back at any time to continue to give us some updates.
Thank you, and thank you all your listening audience.
And thank you for joining us on this edition of Up Close on METV.